we have talks about Trump's immigration plan for 2025 if he gets reelected. Trump has been pushing his rhetoric further and further to the right in recent months. He's calling his political opponents vermin. He is explicitly talking about deep xenophobic policy implementations, and he is only getting more radical, and he's only radicalizing his followers more and more as time goes on. It seems to me that the more his legal troubles catch up to him, the further he runs to the right to try to spur up his base into action, right? So I just want to run down some of his rhetoric that he's been saying about immigration and what his exact policy plan is if he gets reelected, because I think it's very important that we frame the next election not as a just referendum on Joe Biden, but we have to realize that there's a larger choice being made here, not just do we like Joe Biden, yes or no, because I would struggle with that question.
It's a choice about how the people who live in this country are going to be treated based on where they've come from.
Yes, exactly. So let's get into the first thing that I want to point out is his deepening, resenting rhetoric about immigrants. Trump on the campaign trail in Florida said that migrants were poisoning the blood of our country. He compared migrants to Hannibal Lecter, and he said that that is what is coming into our country right now. Poisoning the blood is such a strong phrase.
I wish I had a less extreme way to describe it than fascist.
Yeah, like there's nothing more to describe it other than fascism. You're poisoning the blood of the country. Are we talking about, the German stock, the American stock?
Yeah, the
like what are we
racial
talking
purity
about?
of our country.
It's just insane to me that he says something like that, poisoning the blood. And it's insane to me. Honestly, it's not insane to me that he says it. It's insane to me that it isn't being met with as much disdain as it should be.
Well, yeah, he says it to a crowd of people that applauds him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it makes me nervous that there isn't a repudiation in the Republican Party against this rhetoric, because so much of him right now is kind of off the screen. I feel like so much of it is just like he's over there doing his thing, going to be the Republican nominee, and he's not facing criticism for his political stuff, only for his legal stuff. There needs to be more political analysis about what he's saying so people understand that this type of rhetoric isn't normal.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
There's too much focus on his legal stuff, which is important, but this is more important. This is how it'll impact you every day.
Yeah, definitely. It reminds me of when we talked about the rise of the AfD in Germany, how the center-right party will partner with the far-right party to gain power, and they ignore all of these kind of horrific things. This is what happened with the Nazis in Germany as well, right? Like, in looking for that quote-unquote big tent, you bring under your tent people who are saying things like migrants are going to be poisoning the blood of our country.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
He has privately mused about militarizing our border the same way Israel militarizes their border with Gaza, and suggests that migrants should be shot in the legs if they get caught crossing the border. You're not allowed, you can't do that. That's disgustingly vile. The inhumanity that you have to feel towards these people, to think that you can just treat them like that, to even suggest that you have the authority to treat them like that, or that it's desirable to treat another human being like that, is a level of dehumanization that only leads to further hatred and eventual extermination. Where do you go from there if someone is willing to say, yeah, I just want to shoot you for being here?
Yeah, it's a dangerous path. I want to get through.
Yeah, let's go through
these
all
points, because it's going to make more sense to reflect on it at the end.
Yes. So he totally wants to suspend the nation's entire refugee program. No more refugees in the whole country. No more refugees, period. He wants to bring back the Muslim travel ban, making it impossible for people from Iraq, Afghanistan, or Egypt, Muslim majority countries, from making it into the United States completely. He wants to top flesh-piercing spikes on top of the new border wall and paint it totally black, so when they touch the border wall, it burns their skin. So that is his insane rhetoric.
That is so dystopic. Like I feel like that would be like in the Maze Runner.
Yes.
You would watch them try to climb the wall of the maze to get out, and then that's what would be waiting for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so brutal. And he also wants to bring back child separation in its entirety, which was the pinnacle of his disgusting immigration programs in 2018, 2017.
Just so inhumane, like so sad to think about, right? Because I understand people are thinking about this as a mode of punishing illegal immigrants. And like at the end of this, I want to get into why people are so hateful towards immigrants. Because that's like the reason he has been able to talk like this in the first place is because the seeds were already there and he just had to water them.
Yeah.
But this policy of separating kids from their families, people will look at it and judge the policy, and people on the right who are anti-immigration will judge it positively because they'll think it's effective at deterring immigration, right? They're thinking, what better way to make parents not want to come into the U.S. than to do this? But I feel like those people are completely forgetting that there are children involved that are being forced to suffer just as punishment for the parents wanting to get a better life for them.
Yeah.
By any means necessary.
Yeah. And if you have family, if your family is Irish, if your family is Italian, if your family is Greek, Eastern European, anything like that, and you have this type of uncharitability to migrants coming across the border, your ancestors were in their shoes not that long ago.
Yeah.
You can't forget that this is your story too. I'm an immigrant. I came from Irish and Italy, my ancestors did, and Greece. And I am not going to be a part of this generation who gets into the country and slams the door behind them. I'm not going to do that because I know that this country gets better with the more people here who are good and decent people. It's an act of love to choose to come to the United States because you want to make this country better. So Trump has also gone in on outlining how he will operate a mass deportation campaign, a massive deportation campaign. He wants to up his numbers from 100,000 a year to 1 million people a year deported. He wants to bring back Tom Hammond, and Tom Hammond ran ICE for the first year and a half of Trump's campaign. He was the biggest proponent of the child separation policies. Tom Hammond wants to help organize and run the largest deportation operation this country has ever seen. That's what he's quoting as saying. He wants to run the largest deportation operation the country has ever seen. Now, this is hard because there is a lot of legal trouble that goes into deporting somebody. People can appeal, people can do all this to go to court. Well, Trump wants to get rid of that avenue for migrants entirely. He wants to speed up the deportation process. And to do this, he wants to put all of these people through an expedited removal. Well, what does expedited removal mean? This denies undocumented immigrants the usual hearings and opportunities to file appeals, which can take months or years, especially when people are not in custody. And so this has obviously led to a backlog. He wants to get rid of the immigrants' right to appeal entirely. There is a 1996 law that technically allows this if the person has been here for less than 2 years, but it has not been used in any other circumstances other than initial catches at and around the Rio Grande. Trump tried to do this in his first year, but the Supreme Court shot him down. Now the issue is we have a much more conservative Supreme Court than we did in his first year in office. So that could totally change.
Do you think it would?
I don't know. I don't know how Amy Coney Barrett feels. I think Amy Coney Barrett might be one that would side with the liberals. And then the other one would be John Roberts or Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't have hope for Brett Kavanaugh. And I don't really have a lot of hope for John Roberts. And I barely have hope for Amy Coney Barrett, but I think she's the only one who would side with the liberals in this case.
Okay. So
honestly,
you think it's much more likely they would let him do it?
Yeah, much more likely they would let him do it for sure. He also wants to invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. This allows for the deportation of people from countries in which the United States is currently at war or have invaded the United States or have had predatory incursions. So think about this. Every time he goes on the campaign trail and he's using the word invasion, that's actually somewhat legal rhetoric. Because if he can sell that what's happening is an invasion, he can use the Enemies Act of 1798 to immediately deport all the people right away.
Yeah.
So the Supreme Court has also been iffy on this. The Supreme Court has allowed this in wartime, but the Trump administration using this would be the first person that is not using this at wartime, right? So then this also goes into another issue where Trump always says he wants to go to war with Mexico. Trump has said blatantly he wants to invade Mexico and go to war with the Mexican cartels in destroying Mexican sovereignty. Well, does then that activate the Enemies Act of 1798 if we're then at war with Mexico with an American incited war?
Yeah, that's the issue. If he's president, he can go to war.
Right. Exactly. This is no longer hypotheticals. It's his decisions to make. And it's now basically a part of the Republican platform to say goodbye to a Mexican sovereignty entirely and invade cartels. That's what everyone on the campaign trail is saying. If you ask in the Republican debate, you have DeSantis saying it, Vivek saying it. You have, I don't know if you have Haley saying it, but I imagine she never met a war she didn't like.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think she would say it.
So it's just so difficult. It's hard because Trump himself is a blabbering buffoon who is not competent. But the people that are using him, the people that he's going to appoint, are going to be vicious legal monsters that are going to use every avenue of the law to oppress minorities in any way possible. Trump has said that he will nominate the most hardcore attorneys, prepared what it takes to quote unquote get this done.
Yeah, it's scary because again, it feels so typical fascist where these measures just get more and more extreme and they can affect more and more people. So first you're looking at just illegal immigrants, and then eventually you get to this using the Alien Enemies Act. And if you can spin that we've been invaded by Mexico, right? Or that they've engaged in predatory incursions into the US, he can just deport anybody from Mexico, any Mexican migrants, right? It doesn't matter whether
anyone who has an H-1A visa or an H-1B visa, right? Anyone who is done here legally, who has the work permits.
Yeah.
If they're a Mexican national and we're at war with Mexico, he can use and he already says he wants to use. So like, that's what is so frustrating to me. I can read to you quotes from his lawyers and his teams that say he wants to use the Enemies Alien Act of 1798 to kick people out of the country. And so many people will say, no, he's not that crazy. No. It's what he's actually saying. Just please believe him when he tells you he's a monster.
Yeah.
You know, if that isn't monstrous enough, Trump also plans to make this is quote, okay, vast holding facilities that would function as staging centers for the people getting deported. These would be focused initially on single adults because the government by law in the Flores settlement isn't allowed to hold children for long-standing period without a court order. But the Trump administration is going to go to the Supreme Court through a long appeal process, which is they've been already pushing the Supreme Court to repeal the Flores settlement. And so their desire is to put all of these illegal immigrants, family and children and all, in massive camps, and for them to be waited and for them to wait there, kept in line before they can able to deport them without the proper legal appeals that has been given to them for the past, I don't know how many decades. It's just, we're putting people in camps. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
So like when we talk about illegal immigration a lot on the show, I always say like, I don't want to go and do a mass deportation campaign because I don't like the idea of some American Gestapo knocking down the doors of everyone's house looking for the undesirables, right? And people get mad that I say the word Gestapo because I'm evoking Nazi rhetoric. Well, listen, you're going to be talking about electing a guy who wants to put millions of people in camps. That's what we're going to do?
No, it's important to use Nazi rhetoric when the behavior is comparable to what the Nazis did.
Right.
Because otherwise people are going to think that it's not as bad as what the Nazis did.
And we need to make it very clear that this is terrible. This is how we get there, right? We have to be able to focus on step 1 and beat them there, because it's going to be way harder to beat them at step 10, right? It's going to be way harder to start fighting the construction of the gas chambers than it is to fight the construction of the camps.
Yeah. And they want us to only start fighting at step 10.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. They want, like, they love that this would be laughed at by most people.
Right. They were like, oh, you guys are a bunch of just hypocritical liberals who are just scared. Dude, no, we're not.
I don't think we're hypocritical, but we are
Oh,
fucking
we are
scared.
We are fucking scared. No doubt about that. And I said on the other one of our podcasts, man, fascism is going to come in the future with hearts and rainbows.
Yeah.
And I like that's what I feel like is happening right now.
And it's not even hearts and rainbows, but it's always, there's always a blanket over it.
Yeah.
Is the thing. This isn't like, oh, this is all happy-go-lucky, but it's like it's not serious. So it doesn't feel as sharp or threatening in the immediate term.
Exactly.
Yeah. I will give props because part of the reason that we are talking about this right now is because off the back of a New York Times article that talked about it.
Yeah.
And they are giving all of this information, and they're obviously extremely mainstream media. So I want to give them props for calling this out and not really pulling punches on talking about how extreme it is looking to be.
No, for sure. The Washington Post had a good article too, showing how Trump's use of the word vermin for his political opponents is equal to that of what Mussolini was doing in the early part of his rise to power.
Wow.
So great article from the Washington Post too. And so now what he wants to do is deport millions of people and put millions of people in camps. That's going to take a lot of people. That's going to take a lot of manpower. How is he going to get this manpower? Well, Stephen Miller, his immigration advisor during his first term in office, hopefully his last, but so far his first, he said that officials from other federal law enforcement agencies would be temporarily reassigned, and that National Guard troops from different states and local police officers will become deputized to control immigration. That is insane. And that is one area where local communities can fight back. In local government, you can write legislation that denies your police officers from operating with ICE officials, denies them from following through on illegal immigration checks. You can write that type of legislation. That is something you can do at the local level. Yeah. And I think it's super important that now that Trump has even, let's say he has a 10% chance of coming back, we need to make it super clear that our communities will not cooperate. Yeah. We will not be complicit in this. We will not build any camps on our town's property, period.
It's interesting. I remember listening maybe a week or two ago to an episode of The Daily by the Times that talked about that they went down to the border, I think in the town of Eagle Pass, Texas, and they interviewed a family who the government had come to, and they had asked if they could work with the family and work on their property to expel or to keep out illegal immigrants that were crossing into the border. And the family said yes, because there had been a time where immigrants had come over and were walking through their yard, and the family was scared because they didn't know who the people were and whether they might be dangerous or threatening. So the family agrees, and then they see the government, the officers or whatever, they come onto their lawn and they're putting barriers up in their yard to prevent people from coming through, and they like raise this couple's garden or whatever, and they destroy their lawn. And the couple looks at the things that the officers are doing, and they say to the Times interviewer, like, oh, this was way too much. Like, this is not what I thought I was signing on for.
Right. And
I worry that something similar could happen here, right? Where people are still uncomfortable with people coming across the border, like onto their property, maybe with some belongings or almost nothing. Like, you don't know what they're going to be wearing or look like. And so it makes sense that people are going to be uncomfortable. And because of that, they're going to look to the government for help with that, for more security, but they won't be able to get out of it if the government oversteps. Yeah,
for sure. For sure. I mean, honestly, in that case scenario, that's a prime example of the government doing way more harm to that couple than any migrant was ever going to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? The government destroyed their property and all that when they were afraid of somebody else coming and destroying their property.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is pretty classic. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting about this, with Trump wanting to use the National Guard, is those are military personnel. Now, by law, military cannot act as law enforcement in the United States. That's one of the best things about our country. Trump would use the Insurrection Act and plans on using the Insurrection Act on day one to use the military forces for law enforcement. He's also said this in relation to local police and local crime problems in San Francisco and New York.
Tell me about the Insurrection Act. How does it work to allow military officers or forces to be used for law enforcement?
So by saying that certain acts in a region of the country is a direct insurrection.
Okay. You're allowed to use them.
Yes, you're allowed to do that.
Okay.
Right.
Even though it's so obviously not.
Well, then it
that.
gets challenged by the court.
Sure.
Right. And then you get challenged in the court, and then it gets argued out. And the Supreme Court eventually will probably say no.
Yeah. But in the meantime.
Now, in most laws, in the meantime, it doesn't take into effect. Example of this, Florida has passed a 6-week abortion ban, but that is not in effect because it's in litigation in the Florida Supreme Court. It goes by the different laws. I don't know how it works for the Insurrection Act. I'm not going to say I know if it happens in the meantime or not.
Okay.
But Trump's plan is to use the Insurrection Act day one to use military personnel to police the streets of the United States. Unreal.
Okay.
Unreal.
So we're at the end.
Yes.
Of these are all the points. And at the end of all this, like, I just know, I truly believe that there are a good 40% of people in this country who won't feel like any of this is crazy, right? They won't feel like any of it is too intense. They'll think the illegal immigrants are the problem, and we need to go to whatever lengths we can to keep them out. So, first of all, to those people, I would say, please find our episode where we do a deep dive on immigration and listen to what we say and listen to why it is actually a good thing for the country rather than a bad thing. But I think that would only cover maybe 25% of those deniers, right? So the crux of the issue here is people have decided that immigrants are the problem. They've been told this for decades, actually for centuries. It's funny, I was reading up on the history of xenophobia in the United States, and one of the earliest examples was Benjamin Franklin worrying about Germans coming over in large swaths, right, and swamping the population.
And then they said the same thing about the Irish and the same thing about the Italians and the Immigration Restriction League and all those people.
So the question is, what are you really afraid of, right? If you're afraid of crime, you can look at the data and see that crime actually isn't a problem and that immigrants commit crimes at lower rates than native-born Americans, okay? If it's hurting the economy, that's not true. They tend to not compete with native-born Americans for almost any jobs, and in fact, they just help the economy and thus drive everyone's wages up. The truth is, there's some vague idea that people are scared of losing the identity of the country. And I would just urge anyone to think about what exactly they are worried about, what exactly they have come to think that immigrants are causing, and realize that, no, actually, having more people of more diverse backgrounds is exactly what made our country into what it is, what makes it wonderful, what makes our culture like really interesting and multifaceted and allows new ideas to come up and new kinds of art to be produced constantly so that we are gaining new perspectives and getting smarter and learning from each other.
Yes. You said something good about people being afraid of losing the identity of America.
Yeah.
And the identity of America is not its people. It is not a color, right? The identity of America is the belief that we are all given inalienable rights, and that we all have a place where we can live in freedom to pursue liberty and to pursue life.
Yes.
That is the identity of America.
Yes. I mean, and honestly, like, integral to that is it's no matter where you come from.
Yes.
Right? That is what founded this country in the first place.
Yes.
Let's stick to that.
Give us you're tired, you're hungry, and you're poor, as it says on the Statue of Liberty, please, because those people will be the hardest working and the most loyal to this country, because we will give them the opportunity that they're craving that they're not getting from where they are right now.
Yeah. And it's just so sad that we're talking about the flip side. Like, we're talking about the opposite edge of this issue, where it's like, let's get rid of more of the immigrants, rather than what we should be talking about is, why are we not letting more in? Why are we not making it easier for more of them to come in?
Why do they have to come in illegally? Why can't we just make them come in legally?
Yes. I hate that the Overton window for this discussion is pushed so far towards we need to prevent more illegal immigration, that people are usually not even really considering immigration reform for more legal immigration.
Now, I don't want to get into all of this because
can't.
this is going to be such a long topic, but if you want to get into the United States legally and become a citizen legally as an unskilled laborer from any part of the Latin American world, okay, you have to apply. Basically, your only way to do it legally is to get in the diversity visa lottery. And to get that lottery, you put in your application and you have a 1 in 448 chance of getting selected every year. And it's not even a wait list. You just put your name into the hat and then every year you have a 1 out of 448 chance of getting selected. That's our current system. That's our current system. So when they're hungry and they're impoverished and they have no opportunity in the middle of Honduras, and you tell them that you have a 1 in 448 chance of getting out of that country, I would come here illegally. I would do whatever I can to get my child into America because I want them to have a better life. And you would do exactly the same.